Orlando, Florida has become the tourist hub for the United States with over 70 million visitors every single year. And really over the past 5 years, we've seen a lot of new neighborhoods pop up that are catering to short-term rentals. And so today I'm gonna walk you through one of our newest listings that's all set up for Airbnb. I'm gonna talk about some of my favorite neighborhoods here in Central Florida that are approved for short-term rentals and talk about the pros and cons of owning an Airbnb in 2023 and beyond. So we're starting our tour off today at Encore at Reunion, which is a newer neighborhood about 10 minutes outside of Disney World property. I'm gonna show you our newest listing with my partner Bree Tucker. Let's go take a look. All right, so our newest listing, this thing is huge.
Massive.
So how many bedrooms is it?
This is 13 bedrooms and it has 13 ensuite bathrooms.
Oh my gosh. So what are some of the high level details that people should know?
First thing is that it's over 6,300 square feet. So even with the massive amount of bedrooms, you're not lacking in space.
Yeah.
It has an amazing in-home theater, loft with a balcony overlooking the pool, and the backyard space is my favorite part.
Yeah, let's take a look. You weren't kidding, this place is huge on this level, yeah.
And first thing we have to check out is the incredible kitchen. I mean, this island is like 3 times the size of most people's kitchen islands.
You got 2 sinks.
2 sinks, 2 dishwashers, and 2 refrigerators.
Double oven, so
yes.
This is set up for a party house. If you're gonna have a lot of people come over, like how many people can you actually fit in the house?
In this house, you could sleep 28 people.
That's
and of course,
insane.
There's plenty of room for even more than that to come hang out and entertain.
Yeah, and that's I think what a lot of people are looking for is like, can I have a space where I don't have to go to the hotel, save a little bit of money, and then just be with my family and my friends, right? And so this house is perfectly set up for that.
Absolutely, and what this house has been known for is it's actually rated on Airbnb as the luxury entertaining Airbnb.
Yeah.
And there's multiple families that go in on it for these vacations and they come together. So it's a good place to be able to gather and then not be so split up and trying to coordinate your trip together.
Perfect, let's go take a look at some of the amenities.
Okay.
All right, so you can't have an Airbnb without an outdoor amenity. What do we got here?
Right here we have a private pool with a spa. You also have a covered lanai and plenty of paver space where they have different things like game tables, table tennis, ping pong. No matter what you like to do, you can do it out here.
Awesome. And then the water park, which is inside of Encore, is right not too far from here.
Yes, that's what makes this home and Encore at Reunion so unique and really desirable is you could walk from here with your guests to the water park, which is on site. There's multiple slides, there's a splash pad, there's pools. It's a good time.
And one thing a lot of people don't know is that Encore's sort of split. You've got Old Lake Wilson that sort of splits the neighborhood. And so being inside this area with the water park is a big deal when you're looking at kind of comparing the two sides of Encore.
Absolutely. I think it goes a lot with rentability. When you're thinking about guests and attracting people to your Airbnb, you want close access to the water park.
Yeah, and there's a lot more to see inside. Let's take a look.
Downstairs, you have a total of 4 bedrooms with 4 ensuite bathrooms. What also makes this listing so unique is that they converted both of the garages into a usable amenity on site.
Yeah.
Which personally I think is so important when you're looking for that rentability on Airbnb.
It is, and like most people don't park in those garages,
No.
right? It's like there's not even a mailbox outside, so it's not like you're parking cars here. Usually
Yeah.
you're Ubering around.
Yeah.
So using that space where they can use it for a game room or like a gym, like they did in this case, makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely, and they did a really good job because it's gym, like you said, and then also arcade on the other side. So again, they're catering to a lot of different age ranges and things that people like to do versus having to travel off site and find those things. You can keep everybody at home if you don't want to hit the parks that day.
Yeah. All right, so one of my favorite parts of any Airbnb is the movie theater, and they did a really great job in this one.
And movie theaters are awesome to have on site because it's, again, one of those things that you can enjoy with your guests where you don't have to leave to be able to go do it.
We are 12 minutes from Disney, and you've got Disney Springs, you've got the Margaritaville area and the shopping district over there. You're really close to everything. But once you get in for the night, you don't want to have to go out. You want to be able to just sort of chill, and they did a really good spot with the space.
Yeah, they did.
All right, so it got to be a little windy when we were out shooting, so I came back in the office because I wanted to talk to you about 8 different things that you should consider when you're buying a short-term rental, and then end this video on maybe my favorite neighborhoods when you're thinking about buying an Airbnb here in Central Florida. So one of the number 1 things you should consider when buying an Airbnb is, first and foremost, can you rent short-term rental in that community? Most people we talk to are like, oh, I want to buy a short-term rental in Orlando. Can I buy it in Celebration? Or can I buy it in Horizon West? Or maybe downtown Orlando and rent it out? While many people will try to short-term rental or Airbnb in some of these communities, many of those that I just mentioned are not allowed. So you're really looking at West Kissimmee and Davenport for the majority of the areas. So making sure number 1 is, can you Airbnb that out, or will you be getting a fine from either the HOA or the city if you do so? Number 2 is, how are you going to be using this property? So many of our clients, as I mentioned earlier in the video, would usually buy a place and then use it for maybe a month out of the year and then rent it out the rest of the time, have somebody else pay it off. Other times people will say, hey, I'm just gonna use it as a short-term rental for the next 4 or 5 years. Then I plan on moving to Orlando and using it personally. Now, one of the many roadblocks that you can run into by doing that is if you buy in some of these communities that are more geared towards the short-term rental community, sometimes they don't have mail that gets delivered. Sometimes they don't actually have schools that they're attached to. And you might ask, why would there not be schools attached to different neighborhoods? Well, some developers actually save money on impact fees by not paying the county or the city the impact fees for the schools and the mail. And when they do that, they can sometimes save money on the development and pass that along to you, or just make more money in the difference. And so it's happened to where people have wanted to move into some of these neighborhoods only to find out that they can't get mail. And that could be a really annoying thing. Number 3 thing you're going to want to decide is, do you want new or resale? Now, I prefer buying a short-term rental in a resale capacity for a lot of different reasons. Number 1 is because you don't have to worry about getting the furniture and the TV and all that sort of thing. Also, many of these different houses will have some of their own history, and sometimes that's good and bad, where people will be following and use that same Airbnb year after year. They say, hey, every summer we come and we stay in Windsor Hills and we stay at this house because we love the owners of the house and it just works really well for our family. And when you buy new construction, you just don't have that. Now, the plus side of new construction is that the house is brand new. You're not going to have as much things beat up. You're not going to have to worry about roof and windows and HVAC systems and that sort of thing. And so having that is a massive plus. Just keep in mind that you will have to furnish the whole place, which could cost anywhere between $40,000 and $100,000. And so making sure that you're running those financials so that it makes sense. Number 4 thing that you should consider is the amenities, both in the house and in the neighborhood. So many of the neighborhoods we're going to talk about later have some of the best amenities in all of Central Florida. But if you will just look at any neighborhood that we have locally that's geared towards Airbnb, is typically going to have amenity center in the area, like a pool and a gym and a gaming center, those sort of things. But many of the neighborhoods don't. It's just a row of townhouses, and maybe you have a little spool, a small pool in the backyard, and that's it. So some of those things are going to be very important to pay attention to. And while we're talking about amenities, let's talk about what I found over at AirDNA, which is a website you can pay. It's a subscription-based data resource that we use to work with our clients to make sure you're making really good decisions on where you're buying for an Airbnb. And so here's some of the amenities that people really desired and paid extra for. All right, so there's obvious things here that if you're looking at what you need to have in Central Florida, number 1 thing people wanted was air conditioning. That's a no-brainer, especially in Central Florida. Number 2 was wireless internet. And when you're running your financials, you do have to look at not only what is the house going to cost you, taxes, insurance, homeowners association, but then also what does the electric cost and sometimes gas cost, because if you want to heat the pool, many times that's run off of propane. And then lastly, here you need to add in your internet costs and maybe even a security system. Number 2 thing people want is a kitchen. And if you're buying a house, obviously that's typically going to have a kitchen. But many times people will say, well, what if I buy a main house and then I Airbnb out the garage apartment? And sometimes the garage apartment is set up like a studio. Sometimes it's just one big open room. And so you have to think about these things as you're looking at your investment. Number 4 on the list was a washer and dryer. Make sure that you have on-site amenities. That's one of the beautiful things about owning an Airbnb or using an Airbnb, is being able to come back at the end of the day and take care of your kids' stuff that got destroyed at the parks, or maybe it rained, or maybe it got muddy. I think that's a really great amenity that most people should have. Last on the list, and I actually think this is an interesting one, is a hot tub. Now, many people will ask, hey, if I have a pool, but it doesn't have a spa, is that a big deal? I think anytime you can add an amenity, it's going to be worth it. Is it worth it to take a pool and maybe dig out a spa and invest in that kind of thing? No, it's going to take you years and years and years to get that back. And I have had clients that have bought a property that only had a pool and then dug out a hot tub and put a spa in there. It doesn't make a ton of sense in my opinion, but it's definitely on the list of things people want. Number 5 thing that you have to think about when you're buying an Airbnb is, are you going to be forced to use the on-site management program? Now, some different neighborhoods will make sure that you say, hey, you can't rent this out on your own. You can't put this up on Airbnb or any other place without using the on-site management program. And those management programs cost anywhere between 25 and 40% of the gross rents. And so when you're running your financials, making sure that you fully understand. Now, looking over at AirDNA, I did pull up all of the properties in Kissimmee and Davenport to find out if they were actually getting more per night by using a professional managed property or somebody that was doing it on their own. And on average, people were getting about 10% more per night if they were using somebody to manage. So there definitely is more exposure and more professionalism, keeping more heads in beds, getting things kind of taken care of for you, but it is going to come at a big cost. So make sure you're running your numbers numbers accordingly. Number 6 thing to think about is the homeowners association, and not only the costs, but what does it include? Because there's big neighborhoods here, like say Reunion, one of my favorite short-term rental neighborhoods in all of Central Florida. And if you look at the HOA thing, you're like, okay, so it's guard gated. Yep, I got that. It maybe has some tennis courts, but is the pool included? Is the golf included? Is the water park included? No, there's a lot of things that are not included in the HOA. And so understanding what's included and then what's going to be an additional cost and how will that affect your nightly rate on your Airbnb, it's very important to pay attention to. Number 7, I would say, is heads and beds. When you're looking at what can you actually get for your Airbnb, making sure that you're maximizing space. There's some Airbnbs that I walk into and they have these massive bedrooms with a single bed. I'm like, this could very easily have 2 single beds in here with an easy nightstand and a TV. You're going to be able to get more money for your Airbnb if you can fit more heads and beds. That's one of the major determining factors when people are deciding how much they're going to spend on top of not only the amenities, but how many people can use them. Number 8 thing I would say, and this is the last one that's probably the most important, is the finances. Are there actually financials that the owner can show you to say, hey, here's how the past couple years have been performing? Now, I said it earlier on, there's been a lot of changes in Orlando and how people are using Airbnbs and how many investors are been using the Airbnbs. With interest rates having climbed up, it is getting to be harder and harder to turn a profit. So paying attention to these financials actually is a really important piece of purchasing an Airbnb. I do predict a time, and this is happening right now, where more people will be using the house for themselves and having other people offset the costs and say, hey, listen, I don't really care that it doesn't make me a ton of money. Someone else is helping me offset the cost. The house is being upkept by a professional, and I can use it whenever I want. There's going to be more and more people that do that than just come in from Wall Street and buy up Airbnbs. I do believe that's going to happen both now and in the future. All right, now that you know how to evaluate an Airbnb and if you want to purchase one or not, let's talk about 5 of the neighborhoods that I like here in Central Florida based on my experience working with clients here locally. So number 1 is going to be Reunion and Encore at Reunion. I'm going to lump them together because the location is fantastic in both of them. Reunion kind of area is something that most people can think about, but really they do have 2 different things. Encore at Reunion has its own gated entrances. It's got its own water park. It's a little bit of a newer product in most of the neighborhood, whereas Reunion itself is the area that has 3 golf courses and a water park unto its own. It's gated as well. There's just a lot of amenities going on there. Reunion proper has a ton of different options. You have these mega mansions, which are, 20 bedrooms sometimes, all the way down to 2 to 3 bedroom townhouses and condo tels that are coming here soon. And so there's a lot of different products in this area. But when I look at what's important about an Airbnb locally is how it's going to be used and how close is it to the parks. Because what happens is that as the market slows down, people are going to look at what's going to be the best nightly rate closest to the parks. And those areas right there are going to be some of the best. Number 2 neighborhood is Windsor Hills. Now, this is one of the OG Airbnb neighborhoods. I love talking about it because it's seeing this sort of resurgence constantly because it was one of the original ones. It's one of the closest that you can get to Disney. It's like 5 or 10 minutes away. And it was one of the first kind of Airbnb driven neighborhoods we had here in Central Florida. It is a little bit older though. And so you're going to have to invest some money many times into kitchens and flooring and windows and doors. But overall, it could be a savings compared to some of the new construction neighborhoods that we have here in Orlando. Number 3, I would say, is Champions Gate. Now, Champions Gate's a huge neighborhood down in Davenport. It is about 30 minutes away from Disney, and people will have to fight traffic and that sort of thing to get there. So it's not as ideal of a location in my opinion, but once you get there and on site, it's got multiple amenities. It's got golf on site. It is gated, and it's got both a short-term rental community area and a long-term neighborhood. So if you want all of the amenities of a resort-style living, but you don't want to Airbnb out your place, you've got the long-term side down that way as well. Number 4 is Margaritaville. So Margaritaville is probably the closest that you can get to Disney. It's right on 192 and 429. It's a newer neighborhood. It's got retail all around it. You've got a water park that's not included, but is walking distance from the entire neighborhood. And it also has amazing amenity right inside as well. And so there's a lot of things I like about Margaritaville. The number 1 thing I would say against it is the on-site management that you have to use. And so if you have to use on-site management, just kind of think about some of those costs associated. They have cottages cottages that are just insanely cute. They've got smaller condo products there. There's a lot of different things to love about Margaritaville, as long as your eyes are wide open in regards to costs. The fifth neighborhood I think you should consider is Solera. This is a Mattamy Homes neighborhood. And the reason I love it is because it's about 17 minutes away from Disney. It's down in Kissimmee, right off of 192. So not too far away from a lot of other amenities, but once you get there, it is gated. It's got a surf park. It's got on-site dining. It's just a really great neighborhood that doesn't require you to use on-site management. So while it doesn't have some of the cachet of some of their bigger neighborhoods like Reunion, it does have lower fees, and so that does get offset a little bit. One other thing to know about it is that you cannot live there with residency. So it's one of those neighborhoods that you just can't set up and send kids to school and all that kind of thing. In phase one, apparently, you were allowed to do like 1 year long-term rentals, but they're trying to get rid of that more and more. And that's why it's important to stay up to date. And so if you're thinking about buying or selling a house anywhere in Central Florida, make sure you hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on news that's happening here, as well as insights into real estate, theme parks, and living in Orlando. When the time comes for you to make a move, make sure you reach out, info@positgroup.com, and we'll see you guys on the next video.